What if I told you that Ohio State's win over Michigan State was the single most impressive thing they've done all year? Probably think I'm crazy, right? But I'm going to give it my all to explain next on the Unscripted Ohio podcast.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on buckeyegrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
I'm not on drugs, I promise. It really was impressive. I'm going to explain. I am so adamant that this was actually a great performance that I brought Corey Thompson in, host of the Scarlet and Gray podcast, co-host with Johnny Bullitt, to help me explain. We'll get into that in a second. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. We are the Unscripted Ohio podcast on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network, brought to you by Buckeye Grove, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye, licensed in 33 states, and more on the way. Please go visit them at jfqlending.com. We are also here with thanks to support by GoBus. Ohio's rural intercity bus system can bring you back to Columbus for Ohio State sporting events. Over 40 stops, locations across the state. Visit them at ridegobus.com or call them 1-888-95-GO-BUS. I got to tell you what, speaking of buses, J.K. Dobbins looked like a monstrous bus running over the Michigan State defense on Saturday. So much so that I put out an interesting comparison to him and Jonathan Taylor, because Jonathan Taylor, rightfully so, is getting so much attention for the impressive numbers, and he is a great back. And let me preface this by saying I think if I had my pick of Taylor now in college, or especially going forward in the NFL, I'm taking Taylor. But Dobbins is right there with him. Taylor is at 7.2 yards a carry this year. Dobbins at 7.1. The opponents' averages of both teams are pretty much equal, 3.7 for Ohio State opponents, 3.8 for Wisconsin opponents. And Corey, I know that this is something that you really took away from that game. That's kind of a spoiler alert. I'll let you put it in your own words, but the run game Ohio State brought on Saturday. The first quarter looked a little iffy, but they really got things going in a big way.
323 yards in a game where they played a defense that allows about 55 yards a game. This team, traditionally under Mark D'Antonio, is extremely good against the run. I mean, when you said, Kyle, last week on your show that you don't think that you've seen our Ohio State team run the ball this well, I think this is pretty much the performance that vindicates you saying that. Because many people, like you said, would point back to Zeke, maybe even Carlos Hyde. But right now, the running game is absurd. And I think, I forgot who it was who put out the stats. I apologize. I'd like to give credit, but I can't remember who it was. Last year, I think we ran for a total of 2,400 yards. And already this year, we have over 1,700. Kevin Wilson, the run game coordinator, is just working his magic. I was told before we even hired him that he is absolutely a genius at designing the run game. I think we're seeing that come to fruition, Kyle.
I said before the game, coming into the week, I said if Ohio State can run for 4 yards or more against Michigan State, then I think they'd be successful and they'd win going away. Because Michigan State, in their previous 4 opponents, and I'm excluding Tulsa, that was a statistical anomaly. Tulsa ran for minus 69 yards. That was just, you got to set that aside because that's a little bit out of what the ordinary would be for a game like this. But Arizona State and the Northwestern game in Indiana, all those games, they combined between 2.5 to 3 yards a carry basically against the run. And so Ohio State, I said, if Ohio State can come into this game and run for 4 a carry, I think that would be enough to propel them to a win. Well, not only did they exceed that 4 yards mark, but they got 7.1 yards. And it was really impressive because that Michigan State defense attacked early on. They were blitzing. They were owning Ohio State in that first quarter at the line of scrimmage. And I was thinking to myself, oh boy, here we go, because Ohio State can't block these guys right now. But man, I don't know if it was just a matter of fortitude, if there were some scheme changes. I can't tell you the details, but what I can tell you is those last 3 quarters, they wore Michigan State down. And Corey, I gave you this credit on Twitter. You have been saying all year long, imagine what an Ohio State run game would be like in a closer game in the fourth quarter when they've been pounding on teams and Master Teague comes in fresh and starts running against them. And lo and behold, in the fourth quarter, Ohio State, they stayed conservative in the second half. But Master Teague comes in, they just slowly milked the clock and ran Michigan State down to a little pulp. And even D'Antonio said after the game, he said, look, we were tired in the second half. They wore us down. So, Corey, that is exactly what happened this game. It never got close enough to matter, but Ohio State just gradually wore the Spartans down.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who graduated from Michigan State, who's pretty close to the football program, and he told me that they were telling him right after the game that their defensive line and front seven was completely banged up and dinged up after playing our offensive line. How often do you hear about that coming from a Michigan State team that's a very physical, lunch pail, blue collar team? They're used to being the physical team. They're used to that physicality. And right now, and obviously, and I've said it on the Scarlet and Great podcast, I have, in all the years we've been great, I don't remember us being so absurdly physical up front. And now we're so physical at the front that we're actually hurting other teams that are used to being physical. I mean, that is a complete change of direction from where we've been probably, and I don't know how long it's been, but now it's, instead of just beating you with speed, we could just run the ball right up the middle and pound you with it.
I know you probably don't have Mark D'Antonio on your weekly playlist. His press conference probably are a high priority for you, but when's the last time you can remember Mark D'Antonio saying about any one of his teams, whether as a head coach or a defensive coordinator, we just got worn down? I don't remember him ever saying that about a Mark D'Antonio coach team. Never is just more out physicaled by another team to the point where they're tired. I cannot ever remember him saying that.
No, I don't remember that either. I think he's probably just came away from the game just impressed because, again, we played Michigan State in the past. Yeah, we've blown them out a couple of times, don't get me wrong, but there have been times where we're a far more talented team, yet they're just right there with us from whistle to whistle. Then obviously there's been times where they've played us. I thought they were the more physical team than us, even though we were more talented. We probably just won on talent alone. Sometimes it was a little frustrating to watch because you think, man, we should be a lot better than this team. And now, the last 3 years, you could say it's really kind of come to fruition, the talent difference between the two teams. But last night, I felt like we were actually, at least from quarters 2 to 4, more physical. I mean, I agree with you. In the first quarter, it looked bad. I mean, you watch the slow-mo replays of every play that we had that didn't work, and somebody's getting beat off the ball. Myers took a turn, Davis took a turn, Jackson took a turn. The right tackle took a turn. I remember Munford really getting blown up, but I have to watch the game again. But it just seemed like one after another, somebody was getting blown up, and sometimes it was just 2 or 3 people at once. So it didn't look like it was going to get any better. I don't know what changed. I don't know if there was some wrinkle in how we decided to run our offense or to put in the run game. It just felt like later on in the game, we just put a hat on a hat and just opened up holes for Dobbins.
I want to pay off on my tees. I said at the beginning, I think this may have been the most impressive Ohio State performance. And this is why. I've been preaching for the last couple weeks. I said, Ohio State fans, you just got to remember, there's going to come a time, no matter how good Ohio State is, there will come a game where the game starts and they just don't have it. It just being the intangible. It's not that they were unprepared. It's not that they weren't focused. But sometimes collectively as a team, you show up and you just don't have it. The scary thing is for this Ohio State team, this may have been one of those games Saturday night that I don't think that they came into the game having it. They didn't play their best game by any stretch of the imagination, but they still went up against a top 25 team. They found ways to grind that game out and still pull away and win by 24 points. The spread was 20. They won by 24. They covered the spread and won by 24 against a top 25 team. And they did it because I don't see any discernible ways of flat out beating this team. They're not going to be perfect. It's not that they have no weaknesses, but there's none that stand out and say, yeah, that is the way to beat this team. They can beat you in so many ways, Corey.
Yeah, the kicker makes me a little nervous, but just get him on the left hash mark. He seems to be okay. Although I do think one of his misses in the Indiana game was from the left, but still, I agree. There's not too many. If there's a weakness on this team, it's probably in the zone a little bit. Now, you're right. You said it on Twitter. On the defensive side of the ball, the zone's going to give up chunk plays here and there. And it got a little frustrating because Michigan State was converting some third and longs on us, even when they got pressure in Lewerke's face. So credit Lewerke for playing a pretty good game. Honestly, we said it on the podcast last week. It's like they have a quarterback who's experienced, who's talented enough. He will frustrate you against the zones at times. Because he's not a guy who doesn't know what he's looking at. He's been around college football for about 25 years now. So I don't know how he's kept the eligibility, but he still got it.
He gets a
and
bad
honestly,
rep,
I thought
doesn't he?
Lewerke overall played a pretty good game and gave our defense probably the best test it has seen from a quarterback so far this year. Much better than Adrian Martinez.
I think Lewerke gets an unfair rap at times. I mean, he's not a great quarterback, but he is good enough to beat you if you allow him time to make throws. And here's
He's
the
better
thing.
than Shea Patterson.
He's playing better than Shea Patterson. There's no doubt about that. And people will recall some of the throws that he missed on Saturday, especially that one crossing route inside the Ohio State 20 that would have been an easy touchdown if he doesn't overthrow it. But you also got to remember, Ohio State had him throwing off his back foot on that play because they got pressure. They had been pressuring him all night, and he handled it pretty well, I thought, all things considered. But what you don't remember is that you don't remember that pressure and the reason that he missed some of the throws. And like you said, he made some great throws in this game. Like even against the zone, there were some throws he had no business completing because there were a few times where linebackers had depth and were right where they were supposed to be, and he threw it over their outstretched arms, just like he had an inch window to complete a pass, and he managed to do it. So I thought Lewerke played as well as he could have given the circumstances.
Yeah, and the one thing that frustrated me last night, and I hate to be this way because I think they played a great game, is seeing our guys. I think there was even one play where they had two guys take a shot at him, and both Chase Young and the other defensive end just both went too high, and he ducked underneath them. And it happens a lot to our team, it seems. I think Chase Young might have 11, 12 sacks if he hadn't missed a couple. And it's a little bit like, guys, are we teaching them to tackle high or what? I don't understand. Are they just too tall, or are we just not getting our pad level at the right level? What do you, Kyle? What's the remedy for that?
Well, I think that's kind of tough. That's just in some cases that's Chase Young shouldn't even be in that spot in the first place. He's just so good. Most guys wouldn't be close enough to be able to get him because it's kind of that hip movement and being able to turn like that. Your body is going to naturally come back up after you plant your foot and turn. So I think a couple of those situations, that's just bad timing. The rush was so good, and getting to that point, I don't think that they were expecting to have to be able to get quickly as low as they did. And credit him, he was just kind of a slippery Pete on Saturday. It really is amazing. I think at one point they said he had been pressured 21 times and only been sacked 4. So he was doing a great job getting out of that.
Yeah, and he's also doing a great job of knowing where to go with the football. The 3rd and 13 comes to mind where I don't remember who it was, but we had somebody in his face, and he still converted a 3rd and 13 in the middle of 3 or 4 defenders. And again, it's like you're mad about it. You're like, gosh, guys, you got to get out the field on 3rd down. But you just have to give credit where credit's due. And I think Lewerke honestly provided enough film. I mean, Ryan Day even talked about we're going to learn a lot from this game. And I think he provided yet enough film for us to look at for the next 2 weeks to figure out where we need to shore some things up. So honestly, this game was even more beneficial than even just the win and a dominant win. It's actually the things that they may have exposed a little bit against our defense, especially our defense, and maybe even on offense as well, as we didn't start off so hot. Maybe all of a sudden our great coaching staff, which has shown that they can make in-game adjustments beautifully. They've shown that all year. Now they get a couple weeks to look at this film and say, okay, we're going forward, where do we need to improve? So for Buckeye fans who are out there, and it's not the majority, don't get me wrong, but there's a few of them out there who are complaining about how we were inconsistent and how we played in this game. Take a solace in the fact that we got the win by 24, covered the spread, beat a top 25 team and a Big Ten rival, and we did it on a night where there was a huge recruiting night, and we got enough on film of our mistakes that our coaching staff knows our team even better than it did going into the game.
You know, Corey, you and I have been doing these crossover shows for about a year now, close to a year, and I have been podcasting for a couple of years now. You would think by now that I'd be a professional enough to remember to turn my phone on mute so we don't get those beeps in the background like I did earlier. But lo and behold, I still managed to do it anyhow.
It's all right. We won't forgive you, but we'll understand that you're just, not very smart.
Yeah, I'm just stupid. That's what you wanted to say. Going back to the Ohio State defense, though, Corey, it's like you mentioned what I said on Twitter. It's Ohio State has committed to playing his own defense more so than in the past. Most of Ohio State's great defenses in the past, whether it was coached by D'Antonio or Haycock, just some of the guys you think about, even going back into the 90s, Fred Puggich, a lot of these defenses were primarily man defenses. You're seeing a lot more zone. So people really, I hate to beat on a dead horse, but people really do have to change their paradigm just a little bit. You're going to see some of the better quarterbacks against Ohio State are going to have more success with the chunk plays between the 20s, okay? You're just not going to expect as many 3-and-outs when you face some of these teams. That's not to say that every one of them should be running up 400 yards, but don't expect perfection. If you play zone defense, you're going to allow some seams. That's going to happen. But at the end of the day, Ohio State gave up 10 points. They gave up 280 yards, 4 yards of play against a big-time opponent like Michigan State, even one that doesn't have the greatest offense in the world. Those are very, very good numbers. And if you can hold a major opponent like that to 10 points and under 300 yards, you've done your job.
Yeah, exactly. I get the defense had some hiccups. Don't get me wrong. I'm not claiming they played a perfect game. They didn't. But holding to 10 points, a team that, really they had, 1 or 2 really successful drives on you. You could say 2, I guess, 3, because they missed a field goal on one of those drives, which, it was the opening drive of the second half. But I don't know, guys. It's not, it's like some people aren't happy unless they hold them to negative yardage and 0 points. And I just don't understand if, some of these people who complain about it have you ever watched football before? Because this is actually a really great defensive effort. And not to mention, in the second half, Kyle, did you notice our defensive ends were just teeing off on Little Worky? That guy couldn't get a break for a second. We were getting after that quarterback pretty easily. And then add the wrinkle of using Baron Browning as a rush end. Of course, they spot Chase Young. They have to spot number 2 on every play. They look at him for a second. Browning comes out of a cannon and just crushes the quarterback. You show different blitzes with our safeties, such as Sean Wade. We did a great job getting to the quarterback. We didn't always land, but we did a great job getting pressure on him all night. And people say, well, they had an injured offensive line. Yeah, so okay, great. They pulled a lot of correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't they pull a lot of max protect to try to protect Lewerke last night?
They did. They had their back actually trying to chip Chase Young most of the night. It was and they had to because he was. Like the first couple of possessions, it looked like they were doing a pretty good job against him, even one-on-one. But then he started to have some success, and they were basically chipping him the rest of the night with running backs. So yeah, they had most of those routes only 2 or 3 receivers. And by the way, Corey, you need to make a trip down to the store to get some streamers and some party hats because Zach Harrison had himself a coming out party on Saturday.
He did. He looked good. He flashed quite a bit. He getting pressure on the quarterback. He didn't get the sack. He got half the sack, right?
Yes. Yeah. He and Chase Young split that 1 sack.
Okay. Yeah. I was about to say Harrison kind of deserves, even though he slipped a little bit, he deserves at least half that because he caused that one. And then in the very next play, he actually made a great stop against the run where he was the only line of defense. It was a big hole there, and he was the only one that stopped it for a 1 to 2 yard gain, and it could have gone for a big gain. So, Harrison, you love seeing the improvement of this guy, and you get to see Larry Johnson's handiwork up close and personal because you know how raw he was coming to Ohio State. You knew he wouldn't be an immediate contributor in the sense of being a guy we had to count on to be special right away. You just knew how good he was or how talented he was, and then you see him week to week to week. You're starting from the Indiana week on. You're just starting to see a guy who's growing and getting better and giving key snaps now to Ohio State in big-time games like against Michigan State. And just think, when we lose Chase Young after this year, we're going to need somebody to step up. And now it's looking more and more like, you know what, Harrison could be that guy who makes that 1 to 2 year leap and make a massive leap next year.
Chase Young is leaving for the NFL after this year? That's brand new information.
I figured I'd break it on your podcast because I know you need the ratings.
Well, that feels like something we can promote for this episode. Chase Young leaving Ohio State for the NFL after this season.
I think it would. You know what, folks? Don't worry. It'll be okay. I know you didn't know this. It'll be okay.
This is coming to a shock. Everybody, please just sit down, put an ice pack on your head, just relax, close your eyes, maybe listen to some tribal music or something. Just try to lower your blood pressure. I don't mean to upset you.
Get some green tea and just relax the day away because you just have to accept that Chase Young is. I know. It's all right. Calm down. Chase Young is leaving after this year.
But this is really, though, this is another reason why Ohio State, I think, this team has a chance to be really special because they're already wearing teams down offensively, but defensively they're doing it too. And now that they're getting healthy and they have a bye week this week and then another bye week coming up after 2 games, after Northwestern Wisconsin, they have their second bye week. They really have a chance to get this whole defensive line healthy. You've got Tyreek Smith is back now. You've got Tyler Friday that's on the edge of being back. They're hoping to get Taron Vincent back sometime here later this year. And with Zach Harrison coming on and Chase Young and Jonathan Cooper back in the mix, there are just so many bodies that they can start throwing at teams and they can really get that deep rotation that they wanted at the start of the year. And it's finally there now. And with their physicality and all these pass rushers up front, this is really starting to look like a team that can wear teams out, not just on the defensive side of the ball, but offensive lines are going to get worn out as the games go along later into the year.
Exactly, and there's something that we didn't talk about that hardly anybody's talking about is the defense. You know, we haven't turned the ball much over much on offense this year. We did it twice in bad territory the last night. Now, okay, the interception was not quite as bad as a fumble, but the defense turned it around twice, didn't allow a score on either one of them, and especially the fumble where they just picked them off the very next play because Browning made a great tip on the ball and it went right into Fuller's hands. And by the way, Fuller was robbed of a touchdown. Nobody can tell me different.
Yeah, look, that rule, I understand it. Okay, I get why they don't want the crackbacks.
I get the rule, the call itself I thought was stupid.
I think the call was stupid, and I think that while the intention behind the rule is good, I think that the execution has been bad because it's, you know, you can't tell me. I mean, he basically just kind of did a little shove, and it wasn't even in the back. It was in the side frame, which the way he did it, because he had his helmet across the side, it was actually a legal block, if not from the fact that they deemed it from behind. I think that I get the intention behind the rule, but that particular call I thought was really bad.
Yeah, I'm not against the rule. I just thought that little nudge that's what did it for you guys. I don't know. Baron Browning, you saw a look on his face after they called the penalty. He had this, me? They're talking about me? You know, what did I do? It just, he nudged the guy on the inside shoulder. It's just so ridiculous. I thought the refs were, I'm not one to blame refs for anything, but the refs in particular were pretty bad last night.
Speaking of Baron Browning, Corey, he had another great game, and I'm kind of getting annoyed by Tough Borland could kill Ohio State down the stretch. Okay, look, even if we all agree that Tough Borland right now is maybe the weak link of the chain, and I think that's fair. I mean, people can quibble over that, but it's not really important. Let's just, for face value, assume that he is the weak link on the defense right now. He's already splitting snaps evenly with Baron Browning, okay? Browning is playing really well, and Borland is mostly playing on early rundowns, okay, and early and shorter down and distances in situations where it's more likely a run. Ohio State can limit their exposure and limit the risk when Borland is in the game. He might get burnt for a couple RPOs. I get that, but most of the time they need pass coverage in there. Browning's going to be in the game anyhow, and even if it's just one guy, you can hide them, okay? You can hide one guy. If the rest of your defense is sound, you can hide that and minimize your risk. And I think that's what Ohio State will do going forward. So all the people saying, well, Tough Borland is going to cost us a game, that's not how that works.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm not a fan of Borland that much. As a person, probably a good kid, but
well, you don't have to be.
I think he had a rough night for the most part. I'm not saying he's going to kill the defense. I think I saw somebody reply to, and Pete Werner too, and I'm like, come on, we got to get over the Pete Werner thing. That guy has not been the problem at all. I don't think Borland's necessarily been a problem this season. There's most of the time I don't even know he's in there, to be honest with you, which is kind of fine with me if he's going to be in there. Unless you're making a big play, I don't really notice him too much. So there's times where I thought Browning played a lot more than Borland, and then the snap count's pretty even, like you said. But Browning makes a bigger impact with bigger plays because that's just who he is. I mean, he has that kind of potential. I don't think anybody really expects Borland to do that at this point. But Borland had a nice play to stall the drive when he tackled the guy 4 or 5 yards in the backfield. And I will say sometimes, the RPOs he gets just killed on. But I don't know. I think if I'm going to have to just trust the coaches on this. They're not putting him out there for no reason. So, I mean, there's something they're seeing that they see a reason for him to be out there, even though us fans who have they don't know as much football as these coaches have forgotten in the last 20 minutes of their lives. The defensive staff, to me, which has been great this year. The defense has been an incredible turnaround. Nobody can argue any different. If you try to argue the defense hasn't been incredible this year, you need to stop watching football altogether. Stop it, because this is not for you. But they have given me reason to give them the benefit of the doubt as why they have a guy whom I may not be qualified to understand why he's in there.
Well, you said it best, though. The reason most of the time you're not noticing when Borland is in there is because he's in there on rundown. So when he's making the play, he's in a scrum 2 yards from the line of scrimmage making the tackle. Okay, you're not noticing that because it's not a play that stands out. When you're noticing Baron Browning in there, it's because they use him differently. He's in there on longer downs, longer distances, or shorter downs, longer distances. He's in plays. He's in there to make plays in space, and he makes them, and he's better at that than Borland, clearly, but he's being used differently, and so when they have him in the game, he's making the plays that he's in there to make, while Borland is in there to make different types of plays, and I think that is why you're not noticing Borland, and that's good, because last year, you noticed Borland for many of the wrong reasons, but you're not noticing him as much this year. And that's because they're just kind of limiting the exposure, using him for his strengths, using Browning for his strengths.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to ever expect Borland to become that high big play guy but again, the staff has given me reason to give them benefit. Last year, nobody trusted the staff, so we all just wondered about every single player that was in the game, even Arnett, who can anybody argue that Arnett's not turned it around completely to the point where he gets hurt in a game, and last year, if he got hurt in a game, most of Buckeye Nation would be breathing a sigh of relief, unfortunately, but not that they want him to get hurt, but they'd be like, okay, get the next guy in because Arnett, isn't any good. This year, Arnett gets hurt, and it's, okay, how long is he out? What's the nature of his injury? We need to know these things. Even though Cam Brown, being an unsung hero, is filled in admirably for he's got a bright future for Arnett, but I have every reason to believe that this staff has a reason to have Borland in the game. Even though I may not disagree with it, I understand they know far, 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 far more about what's going on than I do or ever will. So I have no choice but to trust them on it. And I think that Buckeye Nation should really give the defensive staff the benefit of the doubt, because I really kind of I see the hot takes on Twitter and everything. I get tired of they just have them in there because of the good old boys club or whatever, because of loyalty, whatever. Guys, they didn't recruit him. The staff did not recruit him. They don't have any reason to be loyal to him other than he's a Buckeye, along with the other 84 that are there. If they have him out there, there's a reason they trust him to be out there.
They almost completely overhauled their defensive staff, and this second staff, which is completely different from the one last year, thinks the same thing about having him out there. So that should tell you something. There's a reason when you get two different major Division I college football staffs thinking the same thing about a guy. They're seeing things that he's legitimately earned his playing time. But I want to go to the Damon Arnett thing, because I was laughing at that last night on Twitter. I was getting so many questions. What happened to Arnett? What's his injury? How long is he going to be out for? And by the way, if you haven't heard it, it appears it's a hand injury. Ryan Day did not expand on it after the game, but he did say he's going to be fine. Worst case scenario, let's say it's something that he misses a couple games, and I don't even know that that's the case. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals here. The good news
confirming Arnett out for the season.
I do have this thing about reporting on injuries, and they happen to be true. It's amazing how that works out.
You speak them into existence.
Yeah, I guess so. But the good news here for Ohio State is they have a bye week this week. Northwestern's a terrible offense. Wisconsin is going to be a tough challenge, but they're more of a running offense. There's another bye week after that. Maryland and Rutgers after those bye weeks. So there's a lot of time here for Damon Arnett to get healthy where I think they'd get by if he were to miss any games, and maybe he'll be ready for Northwestern. So fortunately, I don't think this is whatever the deal is. It looks like it's a hand injury. It doesn't appear it's going to be anything to worry about. And it is kind of funny, like you said, last year everybody was like, oh, well. But this year it's like, oh, no, well, let's hold our breaths and hope Arnett's not out for any period of time.
Yeah, Arnett's playing himself into a probably, I wouldn't say first-round draft pick, but at least a second-round, third-round the latest. He's making himself some money this year. What a good choice to come back. And look, Okudah's the star. Don't get me wrong. Okudah is the star. But can you tell me he's playing that much better than Arnett this year?
There has not been... I'm trying to be really careful before I say this because I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I don't think I've seen a single pass thrown his way this year where he wasn't in position to make a play. And last year we saw him sometimes in position to make a play, but he wouldn't play the ball very well, and then he'd push off or something along those lines. I think in every single instance this year, he's been right where he needed to be to make a play on the ball and has made a play on the ball. Anytime a receiver has made a catch on him, it's usually just been a great grab where he was right there, did everything he could, and the receiver just made a good catch. I think Arnett has been nearly flawless so far in coverage.
Yeah, I think I remember the one deep ball Cincinnati had on him, and that's the last play I remember anybody having on him of any consequence, So, and they didn't even end up scoring on it, obviously, because obviously you saw the shutout. But Arnett's been, 180 turnaround, and by the way, Wade also, by the way, is showing some elite play this year. Okudah obviously has been elite. People. We had one joker Michigan fan, talk about Darryl Stewart catching that pass on Okudah, even though it was a zone, but and a touch in the end zone. But safeties are looking better. I thought, a pleasant surprise. You've seen Proctor play a lot more last night. Do you think that was by design or just because they just got ahead and decided to play some younger guys?
I kind of think it was, maybe it was by design, but I kind of got the impression it was to try, just give him a shot and see how he did. He did make that one tackle there on the sideline, but I kind of yelled out, I'm like, Josh, that wasn't a very good form. Like, he basically just lowered his shoulder on the tight end and just like shoved him out of bounds rather than actually trying to tackle him. Not real good on the form category, but at least he was there to make the hit.
Yeah, sometimes that'll bite you. They'll bounce off of it and make another 20 yards because you weren't there to make the play. But I'm actually happy to see him try to instigate contact, though. That was a good thing. I agree, though, the form wasn't perfect. It was almost as bad as that guy trying to strip Dobbins instead of tackle him on a 67-yard run.
But this kind of goes back to the zone thing. But what I like to see from the Ohio State defense right now is how many deflections now have they turned into interceptions? That's because of this zone defense and facing the quarterback. Like, it almost feels like every time there's been a deflection in the secondary, it's wound up with an Ohio State interception.
Yeah, Browning is becoming a problem. He's actually really figuring out the zone coverage in the middle. And there was a couple passes where Lewerke just made NFL-type throws to get it over Browning's head. And maybe Browning could have been a little deeper in coverage, but he's so big and so quick and fast, and he's covering the middle of the field most of the time when he's in that zone coverages, if he's not rushing the quarterback. That imagine trying to throw. There's a guy in the middle there. You're trying to throw it in the middle, and there's a guy roaming in the middle who's 6'3", 240, and he runs like a deer. I mean, that's going to cause some problems for a quarterback who needs to get rid of the ball quickly because you got another monster bearing down on you by the number 2.
So, Corey, I want to do a little bit bigger picture here for a second. First, let's start in the Big Ten. If Michigan and the offense is starting to find its stride, according to Jim Harbaugh, then
they look scary.
Then what has Ohio State found?
The fountain of youth? I don't know. I think Harbaugh might be on medication if he actually believes that, or else he's just saying it to save face, because even the Michigan fan base heard that and said, "Wait, what?" Because they were definitely not happy with the offensive performance against Iowa.
I think you're right. I mean, I think Harbaugh's just saying it to get people off his back. I get it. He's tired of talking about the negativity. I mean, that's part of the job, but he doesn't want to deal with it. So I get it. That's his way of just kind of shrugging it off. But if you're a Michigan fan right now, don't you find that a little patronizing, a little insulting? It's like you just had a game where you scored 10 points and under 300 yards. Yeah, they got the win, thanks to a good defensive effort and a statue Nathan Stanley. But if I were a Michigan fan, I'd be insulted by hearing that. You're finding your stride. I mean, I didn't see any strides whatsoever in that offense.
No, they actually look like they're getting worse. Remember, they were back after Rutgers? Well, you run into a team with a pulse and you find out you're not actually back. Look, Iowa's a good defense, don't get me wrong, but 10 points at home, if Ohio State won 10-3, I would be joining some of the fans who somehow have concerns after the Michigan State game. If, say, we beat them 10-3, I'd say, okay, you know what? Our offense is nowhere near as good as we thought it was. But, you put up 500-something yards and 34 points, you start thinking, okay, our offense is pretty good. It's a good defense. But Michigan's offense is just putrid. And I still maintain their defense is good, not elite. I mean, they played, like you said, a basic offensive system against Iowa with a statue of Nate Stanley. I argue Gunnar Hoke might be better than Nate Stanley. Good Lord, he is pitiful. Even his 50-50 balls were in no position for his receivers to make a play. It was just ridiculous. So I don't know. I wouldn't have any confidence in my team at all if my coach thought that was hitting the stride. But I have to believe, and I would have to tell myself he doesn't actually believe that.
That's the thing. It's if you watch Ohio State, they played a top 10 defense, a better defense than Iowa. Iowa's a good defense. Michigan State's a really good defense. Ohio State's bad performance against a good defense, like you said, that's 34 points and over 500, almost 530 yards. Michigan's performance against a good defense, 10 points and 289 yards. So that's the difference. But I mean, there's a mountain of difference between those two teams right now. So, yeah, I think Jim Harbaugh is just saying things just to get the press off his back, but still, there are no strides to be had there right now. They're not making them at the moment.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like Northwestern, whose offense is also putrid. Pat Fitzgerald wanted to say, well, I'll get the 40,000 on Twitter and teach me how to run off or whatever it was, and because he's kind of tired of hearing it as well. But you guys, you got to face up to the music. Your offense is not good. And there's a reason why Ryan Day's not fielding questions, what's wrong with your offense? Well, because he has it working. You guys don't. And honestly, if you can't score on Nebraska going to Northwestern, then something's wrong with you. And Michigan at home, yikes, that game set college football back about 75 years.
So, Corey, Pete Thamel's column in Yahoo Sports Saturday night, he quoted a couple of anonymous NFL scouts that gushed over this Ohio State offense. One of them said Ohio State was deep. They were talented, the most talented team they've had since 2015. They played hard. They're, quote, a monster. Another scout said Ohio State is clearly better than Clemson. They would crush Clemson right now. Is there anybody on paper that you wouldn't favor Ohio State right now at this point in the season? I know it doesn't matter right now anyway. But right now, is there anybody that you would favor to beat Ohio State if they played head-to-head?
Is it neutral field?
Neutral location.
I was about to say, if we're going to Alabama, I'm going to favor Alabama. I mean, it just is what it is. Go to Clemson, I'd probably still favor Clemson. I know they're not playing like it right now, but it's Clemson. They still have plenty of talent to wake up at any moment. But is there anybody on paper in a neutral location that I think Ohio State can't beat? No, I think they can beat anybody in the country in a neutral location, especially if they were at Columbus. But on paper, they're as talented as anybody. I mean, they have an elite quarterback who's already elite. Doesn't even need more time to develop, and he's just not even scratching the surface of what he can be, which is scary. You got a running back who's playing elite right now. I mean, we talked about it on Twitter that he's playing as well as Jonathan Taylor. I mean, some people don't want to say that because they think you're automatically equating him to John Taylor's future. Not what we're doing, but he's playing every bit as well right now. We've got a wide receiver core that is, you got players all over the field who can make plays, an offensive line that's dominating, and a defense that's done a complete 180. They became the 85 Bears overnight. to quote a Michigan fan, going from being a sieve last year to being a legitimate top 10 defense this year. Who can't they beat is the question.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson's struggles have been notoriously noted by a lot of people, by pretty much everybody. Bama gave up 300 yards rushing to Ole Miss. I mean, they did win convincingly in that game, but still, they have had problems with that defensive front seven. Their secondary is still pretty good, but teams are running on Bama. Oklahoma, good grief. I mean, they got lit up a couple of drives by Kansas on Saturday. They won 45-20, but their defense has been struggling quietly, and nobody's noticing because of how good their offense has been. LSU, I don't know if people noticed, but despite the yards and the points they're putting up, Joe Burrow playing really, really well. They're playing some terrible defenses. The average defense they've played is something like 89 out of 130 teams. So you look down at the top 10,
what about
and there are
DBU
a lot of teams.
in Texas?
That's right. I don't even want to get started on Texas. There are a lot of teams playing really well right now, but all of them have some clear weaknesses. And when I look at this Ohio State team, and I'm doing so objectively, I don't see a clear weakness. That's not to say they're perfect and they're going to just run over everybody. But teams are going to have to play, I think, above their heads to beat Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is right now a playoff team. I don't know that it'll maintain. I hope it maintains. But, I mean, and everybody's kind of like spooked and they're wondering when it's going to all come crashing down, because that's what it's felt like the last couple of years, where usually we're teetering on the edge of being upset, and then finally it happens, and the dam breaks, and the flood just takes out the entire village, and we lose by 29 to Purdue. I don't see that happening this year. I think if we do lose, it's going to be a close game with somebody. You just got to hope it's not with somebody who really has no business beating us. But I think Ryan Day and his just hunger to be a great coach has really rejuvenated the program. It sounds, I mean, you're playing off the joke Urban Meyer made on his own program. He's rebuilt the Ohio State program. But, obviously there was nothing to rebuild. The infrastructure was strong, but maybe the new blood has kind of helped rejuvenate the program a little bit, made it a little bit more, let's just say, they look like they're having more fun this year.
I think there is some truth to it in the fact that they have rebuilt the culture already. The culture was kind of slipping the last few years. There just was that self-doubt.
Kyle hates Urban Meyer. I didn't know.
But there really was. I mean, people have noted that there was some self-doubt. There was a lack of confidence. Sometimes they just kind of looked like they're going through the motions. Not always, but I think that was overstated at times. But there was a legitimate concern about that, and I feel like they have just rebuilt the culture, and now they're out there to play and have fun, and I think that's been noticeable.
Yeah, Robert Landers noted something about practice with Ryan Day that I found to be very interesting, that in practice they're playing more football, more 11 on 11. They're getting more and more football situations rather than drills, and honestly, you can see it playing out on the field. I mean, it's like we didn't have a 40-point win against Michigan State. But do you ever see this team ever panic, even when things are not going right?
They didn't panic Saturday night, and they could have. They were in a situation where after that first quarter, a lesser team could have panicked. We saw Ohio State panic kind of in that situation in 2015. They weren't expecting to be in that situation, especially with the backup quarterback by Michigan State. But they did kind of panic a little bit. But you didn't see that out of this Ohio State team. Even after that sluggish first quarter, where it was 3-0 and 16 total offensive yards, they just kept with their game plan, kept at it, and eventually just took control of the game. And boy, did they ever in that second quarter, 24 points and 300 yards. They took over quickly, but they stayed the course, and that was adversity right there. It may not look like it at a 34-10 final score, but that game was adversity, and they handled it.
Yeah, and you want that adversity now. You don't want it in week 11, Imagine their first bit of adversity going against Penn State right before they play Michigan, and they don't necessarily have the background to look back and, hey, we faced this before, we've been here before, we're fine, we're going to be fine. So I actually was hoping to see some adversity. I know it sounds weird to say because you want to blow everybody out, but you're kind of hopeful that, hey, you're going to get punched in the mouth, and they got punched in the mouth in the first quarter, the offensive line especially, and look at how they responded. I mean, it's a culture of a team that picks itself up and treats each other like the brotherhood is supposed to treat each other. And if something's going wrong, they pick each other up. They tell where they can improve. They try to just figure it out. rather than, what are we going to do?
Well, it'll be interesting because they've got Northwestern next week after the bye this week, and I'll preview Northwestern a little bit more next week. There's no sense in getting to that game, and that Northwestern offense is just so bad. It wasn't great last year, but it is shocking to see how bad they have become.
And they got that 5-star transfer. It's amazing. People thought that they could actually be something because of his transfer.
Yeah, they are so bad. I think in total offense out of 130 teams, they're ranked like 121 or 123 or something like that. It's insane how bad they've been.
Jeremiah put out the stats this morning on Twitter.
126 out of 130. That's insane. We'll talk about Northwestern next week, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, but it is interesting. I mean, you look at some of the future games. Everybody has circled the Wisconsin game the week after. They've circled the Penn State game, and of course the Michigan game, no matter how good or bad or how much Michigan's offense hits its stride, you're always going to have that Michigan game circled too. So, but if you look ahead right now, I mean, Ohio State projects to be double-digit favorites against both Wisconsin and Penn State, which is incredible because we're talking about a pair of likely top 10 teams when they play them, and they're still going to be double-digit favorites, albeit at home, but still against two really good teams.
Yeah, and I got to give Penn State credit. I thought they would really fall back this year, and they really haven't. Sean Clifford actually is looking to be better than Trace McSorley was. And honestly, they have plenty of good. They don't have a Saquon Barkley, but they had. I'm still saying his name wrong. Saquon Barkley, but they have plenty of young guys like Devin Ford, Noah Cain, and Ricky Slade who are pretty good. Obviously, Ken Hamler, and they have Jahan. I think it's Jashawn Doxson is his name. They have plenty of good players and a really good defense led by Micah Parsons. So I give them credit. I thought they were going to lose 4 games this year. They still might. They haven't really played anybody yet. They play Iowa next week, so it'll be interesting. I think that's what Johnny and I will do probably on Thursday is do more of a college football landscape type show since there's not going to be too much to talk about with Ohio State unless we find some news between now and then. But there's some really interesting games this Saturday that really could shape not directly, but help shape Ohio State's future the rest of the season.
There are some sensational games in college football this week. You've got Michigan State, Wisconsin, as you said, Penn State, Iowa. There's the Florida LSU showdown this week. Alabama, Texas A&M, I think is a yawner, a snooze fest. I see some people including that in the big games. That's not a big game. Alabama's going to crush a very bad A&M team, and I'm tired of A&M being called a good team because they're not. But either way, there are some really good games coming up this week. It should be a lot of fun, as you said. That's probably going to be a great focus for Shane Larson over on the Gridiron Game Time podcast for sure. So
yeah, we're going to steal his thunder this week. Sorry, Shane. I don't know what to tell you.
You do what you got to do, and then if Shane needs to come after you, he'll know where to find you.
Oh, cool. You going to tell him?
Yeah, maybe. It depends.
Oh, okay.
Depends on my mood, honestly.
He ain't coming here from Boise. He ain't coming away with Florida.
Yeah, that's true. We couldn't even get Shane to come in this weekend for our unscripted Ohio viewing party.
That's because you didn't invite me. He says, well, if I'm not going to meet up with Corey, what's the point?
Well, it was a better party that way.
True. You sacrificed for a better party.
Yeah, I did. So anyhow, that is going to wrap it up today. Later this week, of course, you can hear Corey and Johnny on the Unscripted Ohio, on the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. That'll be Tuesday and Thursday, as I mentioned. Shane with Gridiron Game Time on Thursday. Chris Drew with the next edition of the Dog Days podcast on Tuesday, talking about the Cleveland Browns' big showdown Monday night with the 49ers. I'll be back on Wednesday and Friday. What's going on with Jack Miller? That'll be a question I'll try to answer later this week. We'll get into that and talk a little more college football as it's bye week for the Buckeyes. We'll see what else we can pull off this week. Corey, thanks, buddy, for tag teaming this one with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me as always, but I still hate you.
Yeah, feelings mutual. That's going to wrap it up. Please catch me on Twitter at KYLam8 or catch Unscripted Ohio on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. You can catch Corey on there at Scarlet Great CT. That's going to do it for us, everybody. Make sure you catch Corey and Johnny tomorrow, and I'll be back on Wednesday. Have a good week.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.